Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles. Now, y'all know me, I'm Nick. But it's the guy to the right of me that you should know because he's the man of the hour, the man with the power. He's very sweet, very little sour. And somehow, Q, we have managed to make this show last longer than some marriages last. Welcome to the 1 year anniversary.
Happy anniversary, Nick. We're officially off the honeymoon now.
We are. I hope everything will still work out. I hope that we don't need counseling anytime soon. We got lots to cover and very little time, as always. But Q, first and foremost, tell me how your week was.
Uh, Great weekend. I ended up working Saturday, but I was done early and got to spend the rest of Saturday night and Sunday at home. And then there wasn't a lot of appointments for the job I do, so I was off yesterday. And good, man. Good. Unexpected long weekend, so it was good.
Nothing wrong with that. That's always nice to have.
How about you?
Wasn't a whole lot of anything going on, my man. Physio and home, kids.
How's the shoulder? How's the shoulder?
I'll see the specialist in just in a week and a half's time, and if all goes well and I can get a clean bill of health, I'm back to work right where I want to be, and that'll make me a hell of a lot happier. Get back to what the norm is.
Well, I warned you. You were benching 405 for reps, and I told you, hey, you got to lighten it up a little bit, man. And tore up your shoulder bench and all that big weight.
I know, you're right. And I was trying to get up to 505 and just didn't work, but that's okay.
So close, so close.
I was close. I'll get back there in about my next lifetime.
That's right.
Listen, 1 year, we've done a lot. We've been very privileged to have the sponsors we have the listeners we have. All the nation is always here every Tuesday, every Thursday. We've gone from Spotify and, of course, live audio to Blog Talk right around the corner to eCam, where we've been very blessed. They've been an official sponsor of ours since we came here. And you know what, man? Looking back, hindsight's 2020. I wouldn't change a damn thing. It's been a hell of a ride.
Yeah, man, it's been a learning process. This is the longest I've ever done a podcast. I did one once for, I guess, 4 or 5 months, and it just was. It wasn't creative differences. It was just wrong time, wrong place. But I'm blessed to go back almost 9 years with you. Being on your old show with Malco. And hey, Malco, if you're listening, hey, and or watching, and it's just been incredible. It turned in, like you said, from a podcast to Blog Talk to all of a sudden YouTube and then Facebook Live, and we have a lot of loyal viewers, and we're so grateful for those people because, as I always said when I was wrestling, the promoter was just the middleman. The fans actually paid the money, so I worked for the fans. And here we do the same thing. We try to put on a good, entertaining show on Tuesday night with Turnbuckles, Trunks and Titles, and we try to do a good show with Truth Busters on Thursday night that you produced for us so kindly. So, it's been a fast year. That's all I can tell you. It's been a fast year, man.
It's been a very fast year with very little time off. In the last year, of course, we seen COVID was literally kicking everyone right in the butt and slowed down a lot of people, slowed us down, but only for a short time, not a long time. And we were able to come back, and of course, we switched nights with Truth Busters, which ultimately, in the end, turned out to be the right move. Audience shows. The numbers don't lie, and you guys have certainly brought numbers in and made an impact. I mean, no pun there, but you really have, and who knows what the future is going to hold as you and John provide excellent content and a great show. As a producer on this end, there's nothing better than, when there's a topic that I'm going, I know nothing about this topic and I don't care. And by the end, I'm saying, this is awesome. I never knew that. I never knew that. And I'm going, hey, Melissa, did you know this? Did you know that? It's great when you're able to take away from a show such as the one you and John do in Truth Busters.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. We get into some pretty in-depth stuff, and John and I have been business partners for, I guess, going into our 7th year, and we're fortunate enough to have sell one of our shows and get a sizzle reel and a pilot shot, and another one optioned for a year. And I just created another one with John, and I just randomly threw this idea by him, and he goes, oh my gosh, I think that's got legs. So we're putting this show together, a new one, which is going to be extremely interesting. Not ready to unveil it on the air, but I'll tell you about it. And we've always gone with Adam Wakenfeld, who's a 3-time Emmy-winning producer. People probably know him best for the U.S. Air Force commercials he does. But he also did a lot of HGTV and reality shows. And this time we're going to go in a different direction with a new producer and see what happens with that. So we're really excited about it, man. It's great. I just want to thank you for producing the show. On Thursday night, you're kind of like, and I take this the right way, and all due respect to you and everybody I'm talking to, but I'm one of those guys that every time I went to a show, I would get there early, try to help the ring crew set up. And, when the show starts, they disappear. And then when the show's over, they tear everything down. But as a wrestler, what I do wouldn't have been possible with the ring crew. They were the producers, basically, behind the scenes. So I always shook their hands every time, asked if I could help when I was leaving. And I know a bunch of them personally. And on Thursday night, you're kind of like the ring crew guy for us. We couldn't make this show work without you setting it up and doing your production. So, John and I are very grateful to have you as the producer of that show. So
I'm always happy to produce it. And I got to say really quick, right after the shoot, I got to say that one of my favorite things you guys have covered to date was the JFK stuff. That stuff to me, I do like the history stuff. But that one there for me was the one that was the home run for me. I just want to say that because I really enjoyed it. And I loved producing the final episode. And if I could give a shout out to both Jon Stewart and Cue Ball Carmichael to, you know what, guys, if you're a fan, you love that conspiracy stuff, please go to YouTube, put in Triple T Radio Live. It's all there, but you'll see it. It is the JFK, the final day, the final hour. It's a great, great episode. I would encourage anyone that's a history buff to go and take a peek at it. I think you'd be most interested.
Yeah, I think, John has been on that thing forever, and so have I. And I think he really helped put everything together the last night so that we could do a consensus and lead people down the road and just let them know all the players that were involved. So John did a great job of directing that show. And, it's got the second highest ratings on our YouTube channel since we did the original history of the National Wrestling Alliance, but it's also climbed faster than any of the shows we've done in the YouTube rankings. So we're pretty proud of that. If you're getting views on YouTube, you're doing something right, because people may think it's easy, right? A girl goes on and puts on makeup and gets 1 million followers. When you talk about wrestling and conspiracy theories, it takes a while to build up that viewership on YouTube, but we're coming along. A lot of content.
Absolutely.
So
let's take a quick break, because when we do come back, it is time to talk the National Wrestling Alliance, which just happens to be not only Q's favorite topic, but I firmly believe it's also the favorite topic of everyone that's tuning in tonight, because it just seems like this is when they're at their highest. So,
yeah.
Q, why don't you take us in the break?
All right, everybody, stay put. Cue Ball Carmichael, Nick London, and Triple T Radio will be right back with you. Stay tuned. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Hope you stayed with us. We got some exciting stuff to cover. Cue Ball Carmichael here with producer and co-host Nick London. And where we left off, we did the tribute to Road Warrior Animal. And so we took a week off from doing the history of NWA.
Absolutely.
Right. The TV title. We left off with, so what we're going to pick up with tonight is the history of the National Wrestling Alliance National Heavyweight Championship. And we're going to start in 1980 because that's when it really started picking up steam again. And the first champion on January 12th, 1980 was a guy who we talked about a lot with a television title. None other than Austin Idol defeats Mr. Wrestling 2. So Austin Idol wins not just the National Wrestling Alliance Heavyweight Championship, but he also won the Georgia Championship, the Georgia Heavyweight Championship, Georgia Championship Wrestling that same month. So it was kind of interesting. We talked about how, Hulk Hogan admittedly took Austin Idol's character and kind of dialed it up a little bit and got the fame and the publicity with it. But Austin Idol in 1980 was so hot, man. He was like a comet coming towards Earth. He was everywhere. And I remember I hadn't gotten to business yet, but I had found wrestling magazines. And I remember looking at pictures of him and stuff and going, he reminds me a little bit of superstar Billy Graham with that buff look, and the blonde locks. And so, growing up, I got the WWF, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, and my exposure to the NWA came through magazines. Until about 1981 when WTBS started playing Georgia Championship Wrestling back where I'm from in upstate New York. So it was pretty interesting that I was seeing, guys like Austin Idol and Ric Flair and Ole Anderson. And it was my first exposure was via magazines, And back then, the toothpaste wasn't out of the tube yet. So they wrote in a kayfabe style. And I'm like, gosh, these guys are real badasses.
And here's a side note for fans, a really quick side note is you said Mr. Wrestling 2, and Mr. Wrestling 2, his wife, Olivia Walker, is actually the person that was making all of Ric Flair's robes back then.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so Olivia Walker was actually, in the business, she was making it for like very high profile people. And of course, well, we're talking to Nature Boy, it had to be the best of the best.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Yeah. Just side note, yeah, Olivia Walker, she was making Ric Flair's robes.
Now, here's an interesting thing that happened. On March 29th, 1980 in Atlanta, Georgia, Austin Idol vacates the title for unknown reasons. Very interesting.
Yeah,
I don't
didn't do that then.
No, and I don't know much about that inside story, but I'm friends with him on Facebook, and I'm going to query him as to what the deal was because he'll tell me. I wish I'd have done it ahead of time, but I didn't think to. And then, so on October 9th, they have Jack Briscoe versus none other than the Funker, Terry Funk, wrestling for the National Heavyweight Championship. Now, imagine this. They were in a tournament final. It was a round-robin tournament. So, in the final, you got Jack Briscoe, who was on the Briscoe brothers were on top of the world back then, the older Briscoes.
Oh, yes.
And Terry Funk, who in his own right is a living legend.
Yeah.
So, these guys are going at that's the importance of the National Heavyweight Championship. The NWA National Heavyweight Championship, as we talked about before, was a stepping stone to the World Championship. A lot of guys came through this belt, and that's the way it used to work. It was almost like baseball here in America. You have your major league team, you have a AAA, a AA, and a single A ball club. And you start at single A, might be the TV title. You work your way up to maybe AAA, and all of a sudden you're the national champion. And then when you get up to the majors, you're the heavyweight champion. So this was a very important title. This almost was a crystal ball type of title because it would predict a lot of the future champions. So I love the way they did that, how they built the guy up. They took a year and a half, 2 years to build a guy up to a top spot. and everybody took turns. The guy would go to the top, and then he'd come back around, and then another guy would go up. And the Crockett's really took care of their people as far as spreading the titles around, really had their head on straight the way they did that. So now we've got October 9th, 1980. Jack Briscoe defeats Terry Funk, and he's now the national heavyweight champion. And then he has it from October 9th till December 6th of the same year, 1980, and he loses it to none other than the legendary Mongolian Stomper, who was a crazy character. I love the Mongolian Stomper's character. I really did. He was kind of a scary guy. And so he wins it December 6th. And then he has it for over 3 months. And he's going to lose it to a guy whose name popped up in the television title, Steve Olszanowski. So Steve's back in the picture, as he was from the TV title. And he's that interchangeable babyface guy that they can put in the middle, and when they want to transfer the title to a heel, got to have a baby. Well, look, he was the TV champion twice. Clearly, he's qualified. Let's bring up old Steve, have him go over on the Mongolian Stopper, and then he's going to lose it to one of my favorite heels. I've wrestled him many times, none other than Bill Eadie, the Masked Superstar. So, in Bill, 1981 was a big. I mean, he's always been a big dude. I've got some great pictures of Bill and I together wrestling, and just a great guy. And in 2002, one of my dreams actually came true. I had 2 dreams in wrestling, believe it or not. My first one was to wrestle in Madison Square Garden, which I got to. But my second one was, after watching Georgia Championship Wrestling for all those years, I always wanted to wrestle for Georgia Championship Wrestling. So it's 2002. Jerry Oates is now running Georgia Championship Wrestling, bought the rights. He's running it. He's filling buildings in Alabama and Georgia. Ring. My buddy Chris Stevenson calls and goes, "Hey, can you and Cicero come down and wrestle for Jerry at Georgia Championship Wrestling?" Hell yeah. Oh my God. I can't believe I'm going to get a second dream come true, and get to wrestle for Georgia Championship Wrestling. So that was really thrilled for us. And it was ironic because Cicero and I had done, I don't want to get too far sidetracked, but Cicero and I had done a gimmick called the Bravehearts. And we had a Scottish flag. So what Cicero and I did is, I had wrestled my whole career from Canada, except for a few months when we were doing that gimmick. So Cicero goes, "You got the flag?" I said, "Yeah, but it's a Canadian flag." He goes, "We're in Alabama. They don't know that. Tell them it's the Royal Canadian flag." So I go out with my flagpole with the Scottish flag with the Pall Mall on there, and I go out and wave it and said, "Until you all stand and sing the Canadian national anthem with me, I will not wrestle this man." Oh, Canada, you're not singing with me.
And if I can say, the thing is, you said Bill Eadie, and the reason why I have to sidebar that as well is, a lot of guys, when they think of Bill Eadie, they'll say something along the lines of the Demolition. It's the Demolition, but a lot of guys don't realize is that when guys go to when it was the World Wrestling Federation, a lot of guys that were in tag teams were unbelievable singles wrestlers in the NWA. It was almost back then like, okay, I'm finishing up. I've always wanted to go to the WWF. I'm going to go there. But it didn't, you didn't go there just to be a tag team, but that's where they would finish up. Like a lot of great teams. Look at Ted DiBiase. He finished up with Money Inc. Look at Valentine. Greg the Hammer Valentine. He did that stint with Brutus, and so you know what I mean. So a lot of guys are saying, "Well, Bill Eadie." No, Bill Eadie was a hell of a wrestler.
It's like Tully and Arn.
Yeah, Tully and Arn, same thing.
Boom, brainbusters.
Yep.
So, I think the guys that actually went in as a tag team were like the Rockers and a couple other guys, but most of them really at that time, it almost seemed like Vince was a genius at putting tag teams together. I mean, he put some really good ones. The Bushwhackers, of course, came in. They were the sheep herders. But, I mean, most of these tag teams he put together. And just for the record, Bill Eadie is the only – it's public record. I don't think he'll mind if I say it. Bill Eadie is the only man that sued Vince McMahon twice and won both times. You know the wrestling action figures?
Yeah.
That was Bill Eadie's idea.
I never knew that.
And Vince stole it, and he sued him, federal court, and won.
Really? I never knew that. That's a whole new show.
Yeah, if you ever had a wrestling buddy or a wrestling action figure, that whole concept was Bill Eadie's. You know, Bill was a school teacher for years, and then he taught at a center for troubled youth, and what a great guy to do that. But, you know, that was part of the mask gimmick, right? School teacher by day, wrestler by night, almost a sitcom in itself, right?
Very much.
So great to see Bill wins that title August 15th, 1981 at a live event in Columbus, Georgia. And at that time, on September 19th, 1981, the NWA Georgia Heavyweight Championship was unified with the NWA National Heavyweight Championship. So they put those two together, and it just became the NWA National Heavyweight title. The Georgia Heavyweight Championship went away. So, you know, sometimes you see a federation, not to mention one, you guys have to think of it, that has just too many different belts. Exactly. They don't want to fall into that trap, because if you have 6 different belts, each one starts to mean less and less and less. So by having this consolidated, it meant even more, because in a guy's head and into the fans for a long period of time after that, not only was that guy the NWA National Heavyweight Champion, but he was also Georgia Championship Wrestling Heavyweight Champion. So the Masked Superstar ends up losing the title September 28, 1981 to none other, and this was a mask versus hair steel cage match.
Nice.
He ends up with Tommy Rich in a steel cage, a hair versus mask match. And, of course, Tommy Rich won the title from him. And then about 2 months later, on the 25th of November 1981, the Masked Superstar wins it back in a Texas death match. So, with Tommy Rich. So, about 2 months later in January, Tommy Rich loses the title back to the Masked Superstar. So they had this hot feud going back then between Wildfire Tommy Rich and the Masked Superstar. So Tommy Rich ends up with the title, and then he loses the title to none other than the legendary Outlaw Ron Bass.
Nice.
And I loved Ron Bass's character, man. He was as tough as a $2 steak, buddy. He was tough, man.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about Ronnie Bass. I mean, I've read stuff, obviously, but I don't know a whole lot about him. I mean, he's not one of those guys, I guess, where I covered. It's probably something maybe, you know, if he had a book or something, I'd read it, but yeah,
right.
I don't know a lot about him. What, can you tell me anything about him?
I just remember how damn tough he was, and everybody said how damn. You know, I didn't know personally, but so Ron Bass gets the title, and this is now March 15th, 1982. He wins at a live event in Augusta, Georgia, and then a month later, well, 34 days later, on April 19th, he loses the title back to Wildfire Tommy Rich. At that particular point, you could have thrown Tommy Rich in Lake Michigan, and he would have made the lake dry. He was so on fire.
Yes.
I mean, that's fire he was.
Hence the name Wildfire.
Boy, I'm telling you, man, I remember that. I remember watching that, and I'm like, this guy is like bursting into flames, man. He come out and people pop and go crazy. He wouldn't have to do anything. I mean, he would lock up and take an arm drag, and people would stand up.
Yeah, once you're hot, once you're on fire, it don't matter what you throw in front of him, he's getting over.
Now, at this particular point, he ends up in a feud with the legendary late, great Buzz Sawyer.
Oh, wow.
And I'm telling you, there's some great footage on YouTube of Buzz Sawyer and Tommy Rich fighting in the locker room. And, Rich had that bleach blonde hair, so when he bled, it just covered it like Flair's did. And, oh, man, these guys just tore it up. I swear I watched them one time in the locker room fight, and I thought it was a shoot fight. I thought they were just trying to beat the living brakes off each other.
That is green, baby.
Right? Yeah, right? You got to believe. You got to believe. So the 11th champion of the NWA National Heavyweight title from when we started in 1980, it's now May 2nd, 1982, and it's Buzz Sawyer. And then Buzz Sawyer ends up losing it to Paul Orndorff on June 20th. He has it about a month and a half, and he loses the title to Paul Orndorff. Now, Paul Orndorff was one of those guys that had it all, man. He had the billion-dollar body. He had the brains. He was good on the stick. He knew how to get angry like that. And he was just, we were talking about him off the air earlier.
Yeah, I want to cover him. I want to talk just a few minutes about him, but I got to take a quick break. But when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about Paul Orndorff.
Sounds good. Stay with us, folks. We got to pay some bills. We'll be back. Everybody, welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us. We're covering the NWA National Heavyweight Championship. We started in 1980 and are working our way forward. And right now, at this particular moment, Tommy Rich loses the title to Buzz Sawyer on May 2nd, 1982. Buzz Sawyer has it for about 6 weeks. He loses it to none other than Paul Orndorff. And I'm sure everybody that watched wrestling in the 80s, that name resonates with him because it's like Nick and I were talking off the air. The guy had the brains, the body. He could look like he wanted to kill you. He was extremely, extremely good in the ring. And at that point, he'd been wrestling for 18, 19 years already. He was still a fairly young man. But, if you look back on titles, they didn't feel a wrestler was seasoned well enough to be in a title contention unless he was like Tommy Rich and he was so on fire they had to do something because you don't want to kill that momentum, or the guy had been wrestling for at least 10 years. And back then, guys, these guys were 250 nights a year wrestling. I mean, it was nonstop.
They didn't get a break. I mean, and Paul Orndorff definitely was the epitome of what a wrestler was. And, going up north, as odd as this is going to sound, he probably had a lighter schedule going up north than he did in the NWA because he wasn't a main event. Like he was for a bit with Hogan, but he was
Right.
never a full-time main event guy.
Right. He was getting the payday.
Oh, he
So
was definitely getting the payday.
interesting thing, he has the title about a month. He wins it on June 20th. And on July 30th, 1982, he announces that he's going to vacate the championship in order to focus on winning the World Heavyweight Championship from none other than Ric Flair. Now, you talk about a sign of commitment. It wasn't unusual back in the day for a wrestler coming up the ladder to say, look, I need to focus on the champion. I need to focus on that, not defending this title every night, but to focus on going after the greatest piece of gold that God ever put in the wrestling business, you know? So he was after that NWA.
When you're going to fight the baddest man in the business, you got to focus.
That's right.
Broadways weren't a joke back then.
No, that's a true story. So he vacates the title, and they have a live event, and the Super Destroyer ends up winning the title. Now, there's a name where saw him, knew who he was, didn't know much about him, but the Super Destroyer wins it August 29th, 1982. He defeats Paul Orndorff, who comes back into the picture in an 11-man tournament to win the vacant title. So Paul Orndorff actually gets back in that tournament. I think it was all hands-on-deck tournament. And people thought, well, look, Paul Orndorff's going to win it again. He's wrestling the Super Destroyer. And then they pull, boom, curve at the end, and the Super Destroyer goes over. And everybody's like, what just happened?
Yeah, it's in disbelief.
Yeah, they couldn't believe it. They thought for sure Orndorff was going to have it. So the Super Destroyer has the title, and he wins that on the 29th of August, 82. He has it till the 3rd of October, and then he loses it back to none other than Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff. So Orndorff is now back in the National Heavyweight Championship hunt because the world title hunt didn't go well for him. He didn't become world champion. He would complain about not having the opportunities to face Flair and lots of other things. So Orndorff has got it. And in that particular match, it was a no disqualification title match. So when they went from 11 down to 2, there was no disqualifications because if you remember back then, if you got counted out, the 10 count, you could lose the title. So they were very strict about that stuff. You had to break that count. So Orndorff defended the title uninterrupted during his reign. Some records show the Killer Carl Cox won the title in December 82, losing it to Tommy Rich in February 83 before being regained by Orndorff March 19th, 20th, and 21st. And then on the 20th of March, he loses it to Killer Tim Brooks, who, interesting character, Killer Tim Brooks. He looked like one of those bikers at the biker bar I used to hang out at that, you know, didn't necessarily look like he was in the greatest shape. He was the guy that was the baddest man in the bar, you know. So Killer Tim Brooks had a reputation, and he was oftentimes a hitman for Gary Hart down in Texas, too. So Killer Tim Brooks has got the title. And then we go into another name that you're going to be very familiar with. He used to say 17 glorious years in professional wrestling. That's right. March 20th, 1983, Larry Zbyszko wins the title, but he doesn't win it in a wrestling match. He buys it from Killer Tim Brooks.
Oh.
Killer Tim Brooks was all about the money. That's why Gary Hart had brought him to World Class Championship Wrestling to be like his enforcer. So Tim Brooks ends up selling the title to Zbyszko on March 20th, 1983 for $25,000.
Well, then, that's big money back then.
It seems to make sense to me if I'm Killer Tim Brooks.
Yeah, I'm selling.
I can lose it for free or I can sell it for $25,000.
I'm selling it for $25,000.
And what that also did is, see, that strengthened Killer Tim Brooks' persona as being one of those guys Gary Hart brought to Texas to be an enforcer. You know, he was one of those guys where, you know, Zbyszko figured he couldn't beat him, so he'd just buy the title from him. And, you know, that That was 2 or 3 new Harleys back in the day. So
yes.
Brooks was there.
Oh, yes.
And then, believe it or not, it's vacated April 30th of that year, 10 days later. 1983, Zbyszko was stripped of the championship by the NWA president, Bob Geigel, because you can't buy titles, you have to win titles. So, again, reinforcing the realism that was professional wrestling in the early 80s. So, they actually have a live event, and they have a 12-man tournament, and this is on June 5th, 1983, and they held it up for a couple months. And so they worked their way through the tournament week after week after week, and it ends up with Larry Zbyszko and none other than the legendary Mr. Wrestling 2.
Hey.
Yep. And Zbyszko wins the title.
Of course.
Of course, right? So that's June 5th, 1983. And he's got the title, and he has it, I guess for probably 14 days.
Oh, wow.
And then he has to have the rematch, according to Bob Geigel, with Mr. Wrestling 2. And Mr. Wrestling 2 wins the championship.
Perfect.
And everybody's happy. Everybody's excited. He won it.
The NWA was such a heel, heel champion promotion. I don't think they loved anything more than a babyface chasing the belt. And with good reason. I mean, Vince was the opposite. It always had to be a babyface champion. Right up until WrestleMania 10. So 10 years, it was always a baby face, and his father kept it a baby face.
Exactly.
So,
his dad did the,
yeah.
With Bruno having it for so long, Bob Backlund having it for so long. That. So, but this is interesting. In this match, they have 2 special guest referees. One is Killer Tim Brooks, and one is Mr. Wrestling 1. Ironically, it's like a tag match with a legal man in the ring with another legal man, and then a legal second on the concrete with another legal second on the concrete. So it's crazy. You got Zbyszko and Brooks, and you got Mr. Wrestling 1 and Mr. Wrestling 2. So that had to be pretty interesting. I'm going to see if I can find some footage on that, because I like to see how that, because that is really, really interesting. So anyway, Mr. Wrestling 2 wins the title, and he has it for about a month. July 17th. It's a no time limit, no disqualification match with none other than Larry Zbyszko, and Larry Zbyszko wins the title. And I believe it was in Huntington, West Virginia, and I think they went 70 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, 70 minutes, an hour and 10 minutes. Now, I don't know if anybody has any idea how long that is.
That is.
I went 45 minutes with Tom Brandy one time. And, Tom, I don't have to worry about wrestling Tom, because Tom can carry the crowd. But it was a 2 out of 3 falls Texas death match, pinfalls count anywhere. And the first fall was over in about 15 seconds, and I won it. And then about 8 minutes later, he won the second fall, and it was about 45 minutes later when he won the first. Yeah, it was. It's
good that night.
Phew, man, I was in too much pain to sleep good that night, brother. I'm telling you. So when you go 45 minutes with a guy that's built like Tom Brandy, it's not going to end well for you. But he kept the crowd in it. It was good, and they kept coming back, so he knew what he was doing. I had no idea what I was doing going that far into the match. When I think my longest match besides that was like 23 minutes or something. It was a tag match, So you really, I don't care who you're wrestling or what pace you're at. You have to be in really good shape to go.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Plus 70 minutes. I mean, that's crazy. I know there wasn't a lot of rest holds in my match with him, because we built up that match for 3 or 4 months. But anyway, back to this. So now Zbyszko um, wins the title back from Mr. Wrestling 2. And this is July 17th, 1983. So then he has it for about 3 months, and he loses it to a guy named Brett Wayne. Now, I don't know if you remember Brett Wayne.
Name escapes me.
Shorter guy, really good shape. Came on the scene hotter than a firecracker, and was hot and gone almost as quick. But yeah, Brett Wayne was the look. Zbyszko loses to Brett Wayne. Brett Wayne has it for about 6 weeks, and he loses it to a guy I know you love, none other than Ted DiBiase.
Yeah, I do. I do like myself from Ted.
So we know that Brett Wayne was the babyface go-between switching the title between heels.
Yeah.
So, but look, they don't put this belt on everybody. This is a stepping stone to the world title. So when they did this, they obviously thought a lot of Brett Wayne.
Yes.
Because to put any babyface in there, but as I remember, he was very popular with the boys. Very respectful, very gracious. Nobody ever saw him in a bad mood, or he never said no to anything. So I think at that point, to a certain degree, they rewarded him for his loyalty and for his ability to get along with everybody. Because there were a lot of you go down this list we got. There's a lot of personalities in these locker rooms.
Yes, 100%.
And there's guys that are teetotalers. And there's guys that will leave one show and drink a case of beer and smoke 2 packs of cigarettes in the car on the way to the next show. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the way it was.
That's the way it was. That's the way it was. And, but when everybody got in the ring, everybody could go, so nobody worried. So DiBiase wins it in Cleveland, Ohio on November 18th, 1983. So he has the title for 3 months. Now it's February 18th, 1984, and he loses it to a great guy, no longer with us, but a great guy. His dad just passed away. He loses it to Brad Armstrong. And Brad Armstrong was just like Bullet Bob. Those two guys were a man's man, first-class guys. I got to see Bob last October, about a year ago, when I went down to do a show in Thomasville, Georgia, and I hadn't seen him in years and years and years, and it was good to see him again and get to talk to him and stuff before he passed. So, just a great wrestling family. I mean, what more could you say? I mean, Brad Armstrong, enough said. Everybody. And we just want to give a shout out real quick to my buddy Tracy Smothers, who's going through a rough battle. And him and Brad were close, so I just want to wish Tracy the best, and everybody's praying for him. And if y'all are believers, do me a favor, say a quick prayer for my buddy Tracy Smothers tonight. He's a tough guy. He's going to get through it, but it's not an easy road. So I want to let him.
You're right. He will get through it.
Yeah, he will. So interesting thing, though, Brad Armstrong is not wrestling as Brad Armstrong. He's wrestling under a mask as Mr. R. Fought to beat Tommy Wildfire Rich under a mask.
Really?
It was Brad Armstrong. And he pinned DiBiase to win the championship when DiBiase was distracted by Rich standing at the announcer's podium at ringside. Now I remember this clearly. Everybody swears that it's Tommy Rich underneath the mask because Tommy Rich at that time had been suspended for the feud with Buzz Sawyer, and he wasn't allowed to wrestle as Tommy Rich. I think he had like a 12-month suspension or something. I don't know. Obviously, he went to Japan or somewhere else. But, in that day and age, so everybody thought Mr. R under this mask was going to be Tommy Wildfire Rich. So as they're wrestling, right, and DiBiase's going, "Come on, Rich, I'm going to take the mask off," and all this stuff. All of a sudden, he looks over to the announcer's table where Gordon Soley is, and what's he see? Tommy Rich. And he loses his cool, boom, schoolboy 1, 2, 3, gets beat. So, nobody's more shocked than DiBiase at the time. So we've got Brad Armstrong has the title, and he loses it. He has it about, I guess he had it about a month and a half, and he loses it to the Spoiler. Now, I don't know if you know much about that guy, but let me tell you something. That man was a wrestling machine, brother. He could flat out go. The Spoiler was good. And he did spoil a lot of people's day, I can tell you that. So now we got July 1st, 1984. The Spoiler wins it. And then he leaves for the World Wrestling Federation. During his reign, was briefly recognized as the national champion by the WWF, believe it or not.
Wow.
So he says, keep the belt, man. I'm going on down the road. And that brings us up until we're all the way up to May 1st, 1984. Now, we already know that Paul Orndorff is gone. He's up at Vince's. And so we're going to leave it there for tonight and just talk about a few guys that were on there. You know, Paul Orndorff goes on to go to Vince and has this incredible career up there with Vince. And then Paul leaves the wrestling business. And do you know what he did after he left the wrestling business?
No, I don't. I know he went WCW. That's all I know.
Right, but then after he left the wrestling business, though,
I don't know.
He bought a chain of bowling alleys.
Really?
Yeah, he was always a really good bowler. I'm sure he was good at everything. He just was that type of guy.
He was Mr. Wonderful.
Yes, he was Mr. Wonderful. He was Mr. Wonderful before Mr. Perfect was Mr. Perfect. And but yeah, he went on to buy, like, I think he had 6 or 8 bowling alleys at one point, and was just, you know, great businessman. A lot of people said, you know, he was just a great natural business guy. Of course, back in those days, when you were negotiating between going from NWA or WCW to the WWF or WWE, you had to be a pretty good negotiator, because a lot of times Vince would put a contract down with a figure on it, and guys would eagerly sign too fast when they could have clearly doubled their money. So, and then too, talking about Larry Zbyszko being in this mix. I mean, Bruno trained Larry Zbyszko. Larry Zbyszko had that big blow-off match in Shea Stadium in New York with his mentor, Bruno Sammartino, which was great. But, you know, it's kind of interesting that you see these interchangeable players. As we know, Tommy Rich would go on to be the NWA World Heavyweight Champion for a short period of time. But it doesn't matter if you have it a week, a month, or a year. Once you've won that, you're a former NWA World Heavyweight Champion.
And it's in the history books.
It is in the history books.
Right.
You know, an old team floating around somewhere. But, you know, interesting characters thrown into the mix. And this is what I wanted to talk about before we got off the air. You have the Mongolian Stomper thrown in there one time. Clearly, he was between Briscoe and Steve Olszanowski. Clearly, he was the heel go-between for the two baby faces to pass the title. Then you've got the Masked Superstar losing it to Tommy Rich. Tommy Rich winning it back for the Masked Superstar. And then the Masked Superstar winning it back. And Tommy Rich winning it back. And then they move the Masked Superstar, goes somewhere else. And all of a sudden, what do? They throw in Buzz Sawyer because they had a hot feud. And as I remember, this one particular time, when Orndorff beat Buzz Sawyer, Orndorff was actually a babyface for a very short period of time when he beat Buzz Sawyer, which is interesting to me. Then you throw the Super Destroyer in there one time. And then Orndorff comes back in the picture, and then he loses it to the Masked Superstar. Then Orndorff wins it back. And then you throw in a name that not a lot of people are familiar with, Killer Tim Brooks. And again, just a big, rough, long-haired, biker-looking dude who's thrown into the mix. And then you get Mr. Wrestling 2 involved. Now, when you look at these names, this is the importance of this National Heavyweight Champion. Look at the names. Masked Superstar, Bill Eadie went on to be Demolition Axe. You've got Paul Orndorff, who's soon to leave at this point to go to Vince and become Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. You've got the Masked Superstar. You've got Mr. Wrestling 2, who, if any of you knows wrestling, Mr. Wrestling 2 was a legendary, skilled master of the mat. You know, he reminded me of the American version of Mil Mascaras. Is what he reminded me of. And then, you think about this: you have Zabisco and Arturo. Then you have Ted DiBiase in there, who we know later would go to Vince and eventually become Money Inc. with Mike Rotunda as Erwin R. Shyster and the $1 Million Man. And, you've also got Brad Armstrong thrown in there. So if you look at the amount of people that are thrown into this title, starts off with Austin Idol. Calvin Sullivan beats Austin Idol. No, TV title, I'm sorry. Starts out with Austin Idol, and then he defeats Mr. Wrestling 2. And then you've got Jack Briscoe. Everybody knows who the older Briscoe brothers were, skilled mat men. And Steve Olszanowski pops his head up again from the TV title and comes in as a filler in between to be able to go in here. You get Ron Bass thrown into the mix. Ron Bass was one of those legendary tough guys who was, in my opinion, probably not a main eventer all the time, but was always a contender.
Always he wasn't ready.
Yeah, he wasn't the guy doing a lot of jobs. He was the guy getting a lot of DQs, going over on some of the younger guys, and just they made him out to be this tough Texan, and sure looked the part. But if you look at the names involved in this title, if you go back to the TV title real quick, we covered 2 weeks ago. Austin Idol has the TV title. Kevin Sullivan has it. Tommy Rich has it. Terry Taylor has it. Terry Funk has it. Steve Kern, Bobby Eaton, Ronnie Garvin and Jake Roberts have the TV title. Bob Roop, who was legendary, at least from his video on YouTube, where he took the guy to school. So if you look at the interchangeable parts between the TV title and the national heavyweight title, nearly all these guys went on to have great long-term careers of 20, 25, 30 years. I mean, Matt Superstar still doesn't wrestle, so.
And, not to downplay them or to, I want everyone to know how wonderful they all were, but I just quickly need to change the show for a minute and just wanted to, number one, say thank you for all your comments tonight, folks. We have put as many on the show as we could throughout the night, and I want to say thank you to Triple C for the happy anniversary comments, and Vinny Gam. I'm going to just totally throw this one right out the window. Thank Vinny for the thumbs up. Of course, all the comments, the Eddie Marks, and how much people love the NWA, and all the congratulations to us for 1 year anniversary show here. And it's been a lot of fun, Q. It's just getting warmed up,
Yeah, it's great to see guys like Damian Wayne throwing comments in there and stuff. My buddy, the first night that I met Damian, I was wrestling Bill Eadie. That's right. Like 11 years ago, at least, 11 years ago, 2009. That's when I met Damian Wayne, as I was wrestling Bill Eadie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in Raleigh at the Old Southern Championship Wrestling, which began Gouge. And true story, that was the connection. And Damian impressed me as a person and as a human being. And then when I watched him wrestle, I was like, wow. And 2 years later, I would take a self-inflicted hiatus. I just quit taking bookings, and I sat for about 6 months, and Damian Wayne and I talked, and he finally said, look, you got to come back. You got a lot to teach young guys. I want to learn from you. Do me a favor, come back to wrestling. And he actually got me off the couch after 9 months, and I stepped back into the ring and spent another 9 years in the ring. So I owe that to Damian, because I would have just walked away. And I'm never the guy that uses the R word or never says he's never going to wrestle again or anything like that, because that's too cliche. And I would certainly wrestle Damian again. And I'm proud of the fact that he was the last match that I had right now. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah. And that was the thing that happened, is when I wrestled Damian at our camp the year before last, it was at that point I said, well, Tom Brandy wants to have another match with me, and if I had a chance to wrestle Damien or Tom or one of my friends like Cicero or somebody from back in the day, I would probably get in shape and go in there and do it again. But, the only time will tell.
Well,
But happy anniversary, Nicholas.
a happy anniversary, my friend.
It's been a great show. Are we ready to wrap it up, buddy?
Let's wrap it up, and let's just remind the world that you're back here on Thursday night again with Truth Busters with John Stewart.
That's right. So, folks, tune in. We got something exciting this week. We're going to ambush you with it, but you're going to want to listen Thursday night, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Adjust your schedules accordingly with where you live. But for Nick London, the #1 producer and the best co-host I could ever have, this is Cue Ball Carmichael for Triple T Radio, Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles, baby. We going out. Thank you. Happy anniversary, fans. Thanks for listening and watching. We appreciate it. You're the best.